read that for you sometimes architecture is done by connection, strange coincidence. I wrote that you saw the Michelangelo's Pietà and you see something like later on the shape,
yes, was
the shape,
connections,
yeah.
yes.
And is absolutely interesting, this thing. What do you think about, I mean, we have inside, in the inner space of us, some forms or some symbols, memories that then unexpected come out and come outside.
Well, it's the definition of life.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just a series of calculations and a sum total of statistics. It's about experience, it's about participation in something more complex and more interesting than what is obvious.
And I know, I told before that you were in 1988 in Milan with your wife, Nina, and your sons. And you stayed a lot of time with Aldo Rossi. What do you think about your project for Milan Fair, and what do you think that Rossi could think about it?
You know,
he's so Milanese, I mean, and
very
so
Milanese.
yeah.
Well, so is the project. You know, it's not.
You are a bit Milanese too, I think.
Well, absolutely, because the project is not about some fashion or some style. It's about what architecture communicates in its spaces and in its own spirit, and how does it relate itself to the city at large. So it's about the civic notion of architecture, and not just about big development and more sort of boxes on the horizon.
So it's for you the civitas and not the urbs, the city. I mean, the community of citizens and not the city of stones.
Well, you know, you have to be able to connect the city of the two, because you have people, but the people have to live somewhere, and where they live is not made out of people, it's made out of materials. And yet, how do you humanize architecture? How do you make it part of a democratic ideal and not simply a merchandising or stylistic feature? And that's really what city life is about. It's how to develop a city, spaces for the public, and of course how to integrate the history and the memory of that history into something which is also opening a new stage. So architecture is personal, or everybody's experience? Maybe both. Well, it's both. You can't. You can't be. One without the other. You would not have the public if you had no individuals, and there would be no individuality if everybody was just conforming to a formula. Yeah, and I don't know if you know him, but Carlo Levi is an Italian Jewish writer, and he said something like the future as an ancient earth. Is it true for you? Well, you can't have the ancient without having something which is not ancient. There is a tension. It's about time itself, it's about history. And I think unless you incorporate that history into the work, unless you integrate, what does it mean to incorporate history? It means to integrate scale and value and cultural significance of what is really there already. It's not a tabula rasa. I didn't start like many architects in Milano. Here's an empty piece of paper and here's a Fiera site, and here do something new, because there is a lot of history on this site, and to take that history and incorporate it and also create something which has never been available to the public, park spaces and exciting interactions and events through architecture. That's the goal. So is again possible to use words like symbol, like culture, like past, like memories, I mean, not in the world, but in European cities. Well, of course, if you don't have the word symbol and culture, but modern architecture is going, I think, in another way. Well, not necessarily. Modern architecture is also changing. Sure, there was a period where people thought that architecture is a bunch of machines to live in, and some sort of product of industry. It is that, but it's not only that. It's something far more traditional, and that traditional value is radical. It's rooted in a past that always has a future, and I think unless you incorporate that spiritual aspect in space, in architecture, then you're simply not really communicating and transmitting a legacy that is what we call European culture.
Yeah. And what about monument? Do you think is possible? I mean, in Padua we saw it, but is possible to build monuments now?
Well, you know,
what about what is the meaning of the monument?
You know, this is one shouldn't get trapped in words. The word monument, the word symbol, the word culture. What do they really mean? Symbol sounds very abstract to somebody, but the minute you sort of start thinking about yourself, the language you use, what you see out there, you suddenly see that reality is deeply symbolic. And the same thing is true for monument. We think about it just as a sort of a ideological word, but in fact, the notion of monument, of something which is memorable, something which has a urgency in terms of the past, but also in terms of the future, is really not something out of line. It's something of the present.
Do you think that a monument done, for example, in China can be different from a monument in Italy, for example?
It would have to be different if it's true. Yeah. You know, the world is not a bunch of interchangeable places and a sort of exercise for just the imagination. It has to be rooted in something which is very concrete and tangible, but at the same time something which is not as visible, which is the cultural depth of a place and the genius loci of a place and its history. And without that, you simply create a bunch of fashions which will go out of fashion very soon.
So I quote you something like Terragni in 32 said, "I don't care about monument. I don't care if the observer understands the allegoric concept of the monument. The important is that he feels moved by the harmony of proportion, by the balanced relation between parts of light and shadow." What do you think?
It's a beautiful statement. I would say that
was for a monument.
Very beautiful, because what Terragni is saying in this quote is that architecture is deeply emotional. Yeah. It's not an intellectual art only. It's not just about the abstractions. It's how those abstractions, wood and concrete and glass and steel and mathematics and proportion and geometry, how they are transformed into something that communicates in depth with a person being there. And I think that's really what architecture is. It's just like music in that sense. Yeah. It's not, when you listen to music, you don't think of which notes are being played and what is the mathematical relationship.
You feel the harmony.
You feel it, yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so what is for you harmony in your
harmony
architecture?
Is the ability...
you said something like harmony, I wrote it down, is found inside differences.
Well, true.
And for example, Adorno said quite the same. To feel the harmony, you must have something disharmonic.
Absolutely. Yeah. Harmony is based on tension. Harmony is not based on a singular idea repeated over and over again. So harmony is exactly, you have to have at least another note to create a relationship. And of course, true harmony is a polyphonic structure that is communicative in a very obvious way.
And do you think that Milano project is harmonic?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, just look at Milano itself. You have to just, it's a city of differences, a city of amazing relationships and connections. And this nexus of meaning and communication is what city life is about.
And ground zero too.
Of course. Well, every city, if it is...
But not every, not yours, but sometimes we find really, problematic architecture.
Yeah. Well, that's the difference. That's the difference between a good city and a bad city.
Yeah. And do you think that Italy has good cities?
Italy is the cultural legacy, and Italy has formed, the idea of city in many ways for the world.